This lady may have stumbled, but she ain't never failed. And if the Russians don't believe that, they can all go straight to hell.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
If you just start looking up, you'll find more good things here in this country than anywhere else.
It was as if saying it would make it so.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
For 200 years, we've lived in the future, believing that tomorrow would be better than today, and today would be better than yesterday. I still believe that.
I, Ronald Reagan.
The country was convinced. And only after Jimmy Carter left the Oval Office did Iran release the hostages. The country was on a national high. The euphoria did not last for long. In 1982, President Reagan sent U.S. forces on a peacekeeping mission to Lebanon. When he committed those same forces to take sides in Lebanon's civil war, the U.S. became part of the problem, not part of the solution.
You see, when the Lebanese fight to liberate their country, America accuses them of being terrorists. But the Palestinians or Lebanese are obliged to do this because there is no logical means to discuss the problem of freedom with America.
When suicide bombers blew up the Marine barracks in Beirut, killing 241 U.S. servicemen, the Reagan administration experienced the limits of U.S. power.
We didn't understand the background of Islam. When I initially landed in Beirut, I was met by an English-speaking an English-speaking Lebanese army officer. And I told him, I was very anxious, and I told him, please, give me a briefing, give me a rundown as quickly as you can on what the situation is here so I can get right to work. And he told me, my friend, you have been in the Middle East for 5 minutes. You probably now understand as much as you're going to understand about the Middle East. From here, it's all downhill.
Ronald Reagan is this country's 8th president since the end of World War II. Now, in his second term, he is widely regarded as having returned American foreign policy to the basic themes of the Cold War.
I know of no leader of the Soviet Union since the revolution, including the present leadership, that has not more than once repeated in the various communist congresses they hold their determination that their goal must be the promotion of world revolution.
We thought that it was necessary to rebuild American strength, Western strength, and also that it was important to face squarely and more realistically the nature of the dangers which we confronted.
When Ronald Reagan ordered American troops to invade the island of Grenada, he told the country he was resisting Soviet and Cuban expansion in the Caribbean. President Reagan calls the Contras, trying to overthrow the government in Nicaragua, freedom fighters. He encourages them because they are challenging a government in Central America supported by the Soviet Union. The president's determination to have a missile defense system in space is a reminder that the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union is as intense as it was 20 years ago.
I call upon the scientific community in our country, those who gave us nuclear weapons, to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace, to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete.
40 years ago, the United States had a nuclear monopoly. Now, the superpowers have parity.
And this is maybe the source of frustration in Washington. We had an experience to be inferior to you in military terms. You had no experience to be equal to us.
There is no such thing as equality when it comes to economic accomplishment. America may no longer be the preeminent power on the world industrial scene, but the raw potential of American economic power still sets many of the world's economic trends.
When the President of the United States is not feeling well, the economy of the world is shaken.
More than 60 years after the Russian Revolution, the latest Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, is forced to experiment with a limited form of capitalism, lest the Soviet economy collapse under its own weight. The change has already taken place in China. The present leadership there has decided that individual enterprise and a capitalist reward system are necessary in communist state planning.
Simply no contest, because there are no examples of success on the part of the Soviet Union any place in the world. Soviet economies simply don't work.
The past 40 years have also reaffirmed the essential difference between the two forms of government. Democracy is flexible, a natural environment for change.
No more will the presidency be for white men over 40 years old.
His candidacy is not just a symbol, it's a breakthrough.
And what does the future hold? This is what America's most recent political leadership told us.
And I've always felt that our country's greatness was measured by how well we apply the basic moral and ethical standards on which our country was originally founded. How are we using our strength and power, influence, our greatness to enhance human rights, freedom, democracy?
I do not believe there will be a nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union. Every American president that has had the responsibility of nuclear arms knows what the devastation would be in our country and in their country.
I believe the great danger for the future is not between the superpowers and not in Europe, but in the third world.
The real, something I feel very strongly about, is the potential of Gaddafi or some other similar leader of a relatively small country will get a nuclear weapon.
We're not the dictators of the world. And there are many people who disagree with us who have some rational reasons for their disagreement because of their different perspective, their different needs, their different way of life, their different religious beliefs, and so forth. And it's imperative that the major nation on earth be willing to accommodate the views of others as long as there is no direct threat to our own security and our own way of life.
President Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev will see each other. They will take each other's measure, and each will understand at the end how far he can push the other without risking retaliation. What we have to understand is that Russians and Americans can be friends, but because our interests are so diametrically opposed, the governments of the United States and the Soviet Union can never be friends, but we cannot afford to be enemies.
So after 40 years, we find ourselves living in a nuclear peace, and it's an uneasy status quo. Just last night, we heard President Reagan say that he is not going to compromise on his plans for a missile defense system in space when he meets Mr. Gorbachev at the summit in November. In a moment, Ted Koppel and I will return in conversation with President Reagan.